Mr. Martineau, we got another witness or any matters we need to address before?
No matters. Both co-counsels are right outside.
I saw.
All right, so I'll let them know.
Okay,
Thank you, sir.
thanks.
Sorry, Judge, I didn't even...
That's okay. I snuck by you. Who you calling next?
Yeah, at this time, the state of Florida will call Jane Roy.
Do you solemnly swear from the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
Just watch your step. You're going to be speaking into this microphone, or does it just need to adjust? Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Sumner.
Thank you, may it please the court, defense counsel. Good afternoon, ma'am. Please state your name for the record.
Jane Roy,
Ms. Roy, where do you live?
in Lutz.
Okay. And are you retired?
Yes, I am.
What did you do prior to retiring as far as what was your profession?
I was a bookkeeper.
Okay. How long were you a bookkeeper?
Let me see, from 79 to 2000.
Okay. So that was quite a career, quite a long career, right,
Yes.
for that? And you moved to Lutz when?
In the year 2002.
You lived there with your husband?
I do.
I'm going to draw your attention to January 13th, 2014. Did you go to the Cobb Theater in Wesley Chapel?
I did.
What movie were you going to see?
Lone survivor.
Who'd you go there with?
My husband.
You recall what time you arrived at the theater to see Lone Survivor?
Maybe 10 or 15 minutes prior to the movie.
Okay. Do you recall what time the movie showing was supposed to begin?
I don't.
Was it a matinee afternoon movie?
Yes, it was.
You all went and purchased your tickets outside that day?
Yes, we did.
What did you do once you got your tickets?
We walked into the theater, and we normally sit in the back row in the center, but somebody was already seated there, so we sat to the right of them.
And when you say to the right, as you're looking at the screen, you're on the right side in the top row?
If I'm looking at the screen, yes.
Now, let me ask you this. You have some limitations with your sight?
I do.
Okay, which eye is affected?
My left eye.
Okay. How long have you lived with that?
Since 2008.
Okay. And you had eye problems before that?
Yes, that's why they did a tarsography.
Okay, so how long have you lived with limited sight or no sight in your eye?
Just since 2008. Before that I could see, but they didn't do anything to compensate for the pain.
Okay. And since you've lived with this for a number of years, do you do anything to compensate for your limited sight?
Yes, if I want to see something, I look directly at it.
Okay. And you'll turn toward it so you can
Yes.
focus on that?
Yes.
Now, you indicated that you were sitting in the very top row. You like to sit in the middle.
Yes.
And there was somebody already sitting in those middle seats or saving part of those middle seats.
Yes.
So you sat to the right of them toward the aisle?
I did, yes.
Did
Yes.
you notice who that was sitting in the middle or in the seats that you wanted to sit in?
I didn't know at the time, but I know now that it was Curtis Reeves and his wife, and then there was an empty seat, and then it was myself and my husband.
Okay. And at that time, did you notice who later became known to you as Chad Olson?
Yes, he was sitting in front of them.
Okay. And how close to you were Chad and Nicole Olson sitting?
oh, I don't know, 6 feet, 8 feet, something like that.
All right, at the seat in front of you to the left?
Yes, 3 or 4 seats to the left, but in the row directly in front of Mr. and Mrs. Reeves.
When was the first time that you noticed Chad Olson?
Well, Reeves leaned forward to say something, and I noticed something going on, so I just turned and I looked, and I saw then that he was they were talking to one another.
So you saw you saw Curtis Reeves lean forward to talk to Chad Olson?
Yes,
And that drew your attention to them
Yes.
at that time?
yes,
Could you hear what either of them was saying?
no.
Now, how many times did you see Curtis Reeves lean forward to say something to Chad Olson?
Before he left the theater, just that one time,
Just that
I
one
think.
time. Okay, now it brings you to him leaving the theater. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, he got off and you could tell he was very agitated. He was a big man, and he barreled across me to go out of the aisle and down to what I later learned was the concession area.
But
Talk
he
to
went
him.
down the stairs?
Yes.
Did you have any problem seeing him going down the stairs?
No.
And let's talk a little bit about the lighting. How would you describe the lighting at the time that you took your seats and the time that this was all going on?
Well, it was muted because the previews were on, but I mean, you could see in the theater.
You could see your husband Mark next
Yes,
to you?
yes,
Could you see the seat that Vivian was at, which was the seat next to you between
Yes,
the empty
yes.
seat? Have any problem seeing the Olsons in front of you?
no,
Could you see like 10 seats away?
probably
No problem.
not.
Okay, not 10 seats. Could you see down? You indicated.
Oh, well, I could see down, but I mean, I wouldn't have been able to identify anybody down there. That was too far.
But the lighting was such that you were able to see people.
Yes.
What about the sound of the previews or the volume of the previews? How would you describe those? As far as the loudness. Were you able to hear Mark talking to you?
Yes, yeah, yes, because he was right next to me. I mean, it was on, but even if you wanted to talk, you could talk.
And could you hear people like in front of you talking?
Mumbling, yes,
And at some point you could hear voices speaking,
yes,
Right,
yes,
you
when they
didn't have
were raised, yes.
and you could hear the raised voices with no
Judge, I'm
problem.
going to object. She's been leading this entire time. I wanted to get her through to a
Right.
process, but it's,
Sustained.
Could you hear the people in front of you as far as if their voices were raised?
Yes,
Now, you indicated that you saw Curtis Reeves barreling out the row past you.
objection, Your Honor. She's now testifying about what the previous testimony, it's redirecting all that
I'm
testimony
looping,
again.
Judge. At that point,
All right.
I'm getting to the next question. So, after you saw him barreling out and going down the stairs, what's the next thing you saw?
it was quiet for a few minutes, and I don't know, 5 to 10 perhaps, and then he came back into the theater, and again he went across me, and you could tell he was agitated.
Okay. And when you say you could tell he was agitated, what gives you that impression?
Well, he was mumbling and just was very brusque.
He came past you.
Mm-hmm.
Then what happened?
He sat down, and then I was nervous because I was concerned that there was going to be a physical confrontation because I could hear him talking to Chad.
Okay, when you say I was concerned there was going to be a physical confrontation, on whose part? Who did you think was going to initiate a physical confrontation?
Oh, at the time I thought it was going to be Chad. Curtis Reeves.
Okay, the one who just came back from manager, the one in your room.
Yes.
All right, so he sits down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you hear him say anything as he's going to sit down?
No.
Do you hear Chad Olson say anything at that point?
Something about he was texting his daughter.
Okay. Did you hear him say anything about what made Curtis Reeves leave the theater? and come
Because
back?
because he had gone to report him to the manager.
Okay. What did you hear about that?
Just so you went and reported me.
And that would have been who saying that?
That would have been Mr. Olson said it to Mr. Reeves.
And you didn't know either of these parties prior to this day?
No.
All right. So upon hearing that about something about reporting. What's the next thing you heard or saw?
I didn't hear anything distinctly, but I knew that they were arguing. At this point, I had my head turned and I was watching them because, like I said, I was really nervous that there was going to be some kind of a physical altercation. And Mr. Reeves is such a big man. I mean, until Chad Olson stood up, I didn't know that he was tall, but I knew that Mr. Reeves was a very big man, and he frightened me. He just frightened me.
So you saw him walk past you twice.
Yes.
When Curtis Reeves came back, up until the time of the shooting, did you see any punches thrown by Chad Olson?
No, I know.
Okay. Did you see Chad Olson throw a cell phone?
I did not.
Did you see Curtis Reeves react as if he had been hit by a cell phone?
Never.
Did you see Curtis Reeves react as if he had been hit by anything?
No.
Now, you indicated that Curtis Reeves is sitting down, and you heard the part about something about texting. Tell us about that.
Just what I said, that he mentioned about he was texting his daughter, and Mr. Reeves wanted him to stop texting.
Okay. What's the next thing you saw happen?
I saw popcorn flying.
When you say you saw,
I don't know who had the popcorn. I thought it was Mr. Olson who was eating popcorn and threw it at Mr. Reeves.
okay. And when you saw the popcorn flying, what's the next thing you saw happen?
Oh my goodness, it was almost instantaneous. I mean, an arm came up and I saw a flash of red, and at first I didn't know what it was. I heard a noise, and then I could smell something, and I thought, oh my God, he shot him.
Okay. And what were you looking at when you saw that flash?
I was looking over at the two of them, but what I really saw was Mr. Reeves with his arm up. My main focus was not faces. I saw the arm with the gun. Well, I didn't know it was the gun, but I saw the flash of red.
So when you say I saw an arm come up, whose arm do you believe that to be?
Oh, it was Curtis Reeves. I mean, it was his right arm.
What's the next thing you saw after the flash?
Mr. Olson turned around, and he was walking towards the aisle.
Okay. When you say turned around, can you give us a degree of turn?
Well, he would have been facing Mr. Reeves, and so he would have turned to his left, and he was going towards the aisle.
And did you see him make it to the aisle?
No, he collapsed.
Okay. Did you notice what Mr. Reeves was doing at that time?
I have no idea. I imagine he was just sitting there because I was looking at Mr. Olson.
And do you see Curtis Reeves in the courtroom today?
I do.
Can you point him out and describe what he's wearing, please, Mrs. Roy?
He's sitting behind you to the, well, it would be your left, my right, and he's got a striped tie on.
Just the record reflects she identified the defendant, Curtis Reeves.
You know, so is it.
Now, what did you do at that point?
I was shocked. I mean, when I was watching them, I kept thinking, I'm going to have to get ready to get out of here because there's going to be a fight. And then when it happened, it was like I was just frozen. My husband stood up and he grabbed me and he says, come on, we've got to get out of here. And then we left.
Where did you go?
We went to the lobby of the theater.
When you went to the lobby of the theater, did you see other people who you recognized from Theater 10?
No, I don't think so.
Did you ever see anyone from Theater 10 standing around you?
No, I didn't know any of the people who were at the theater that day.
Did you ever hear anybody discussing the events of what had just occurred in Theater 10?
No, my husband and I were just by ourselves. Like I said, we didn't know anybody there, so we weren't talking with anybody.
1 second. When your husband grabbed you and took you out, did you ever go down to the front of that particular theater?
No, we went down the stairs, out the ramp, and into the lobby.
Okay. And made contact with law enforcement at some time thereafter?
They were all there, and they told us to stay, and somebody would be around to take our statements.
Okay.
May I have multi-counsel judge?
Go ahead.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Under the witness.
Ross?
Good afternoon, Ms. Roy.
Good afternoon.
Ms. Roy, you live in Lutz currently?
I do, yes.
What is your date of birth?
6/25/48.
And you live there with your husband,
I do,
is that correct?
yes.
I want to just lightly talk a little bit about your disabilities, if you don't mind. You cannot see from your left eye,
That's right.
and do you have any hearing impediment as well?
I do.
Would you please tell the court what that is, please?
I had an acoustic neuroma, and it left me deaf. My left ear,
In your left ear?
yes.
Okay, and so you can see, you can hear from your right ear?
I can, yes.
Okay, and has that been tested for volume and accuracy? Have you had any testing on your right ear at all?
Object to the compoundness of that question.
Break it down.
Have you had any testing on your right ear?
No,
Now, were you taking medication that day when you were at the theater?
I take Synthroid, which is for a thyroid problem.
Any other medication at all?
No,
Okay. Now, you and your husband went to the theater that day, and when you go to the theater, you want your husband seated on your right side, correct?
yes,
And the reason you want your husband on the right side is because then at least you can converse with him and you're able to hear what he's telling you.
yes,
And so that's pretty much a routine in your practice since your disability.
yes,
Now, you believe you got there somewhere around midday for the matinee,
yes, yes.
and when you got there to the theater, the interior of the theater was pretty dark.
Muted,
Would you agree that that also means pretty dark?
okay, yes,
And the way you all were seated was that you were at least a seat from Mrs. Reeves, correct?
yes, that's right. There was an empty seat between the two of us.
Okay. And so you would have been pretty close to Mr. Reeves as well, because you were only 2 seats from Mr. Reeves.
Yes,
Is that correct?
that's correct.
Okay. And when you got there, the previews were playing.
Yes,
And as we know, the previews, especially if they're action-packed, they can be pretty loud.
yes,
Is that correct?
yes.
In fact, far louder than the movie itself.
Judge, I'm going to object. There's been no testimony to suggest that.
Judge, it is a question that you ask a witness. If the witness knows it, the witness doesn't know it. I don't have to, the witness doesn't have to have that question either.
Go ahead.
Should I answer?
Please.
Yes, but when they came on with the announcement about the silencing the cell phones, at that point, it's not a commercial anymore. It's a lot less loud.
Yeah, when they show you the commercial or the announcement, hey, please turn off your phones. You saw that, right?
I did.
Okay. And then after that announcement, then you have what's called the previews, which are the movies that are up and coming, correct?
I haven't been to a movie for so long, I don't remember.
You don't remember?
I know.
Okay. Now, how long were you seated?
Maybe 15, 20 minutes.
So you were seated there 15 to 20 minutes before Mr. Reeves gets up?
He did not get up.
Mr. Reeves did.
No, he leaned forward to speak with Chan.
The first thing that he did was lean forward.
That's the first thing I remember.
Okay. And so were you there 15 to 20 minutes before you saw Mr. Reeves lean forward?
Approximately.
Okay. So what happened during that 15 to 20 minute period?
Well, we were just watching the screen, and my husband and I were talking.
Everything was quiet?
basically.
Okay. And so you were just a couple of seats from Mr. Reeves. You didn't hear any commotion from Mr. Reeves at that time, did you?
Not until he leaned forward and he started with the cell phone business.
Well, we're going to talk about that in just a second, but we're talking about the period before. You didn't hear any commotion, you didn't hear anything from Mr. Reeves prior to him leaning forward.
No, I did not.
You didn't hear anything from Mrs. Reeves, who was just merely a seat away from you
No, I did not.
for 15 to 20 minutes.
That's correct.
Now, when Mr. Reeves leaned forward, there were previews playing on the
Yes.
screen,
Yes.
right? And did you find him leaning forward an indication by Mr. Reeves that he didn't want to disturb anyone with that conversation?
Object to speculation.
Yeah, I'm going to sustain, rephrase.
You didn't hear what Mr. Reeves said when he leaned forward, did you?
I did not.
And after he leans forward, he gets up.
Yes.
Now, did you see Mr. Reeves, as he's getting up, with anything in his hands?
No.
So you didn't see Mr. Reeves give anything, for example, to his wife.
I did not.
And again, you were just a seat away from his wife.
I was.
Page 19, lines 9 through 16.
If I can, I'll carry the rest of that.
Objection to what? You trying to impeach her with that?
Yeah, because I think it's just a
Did I ask that you review that, please?
9 through 16. Lines 9 through 16, I'm sorry, Your Honor.
That doesn't seem to, what, you just asked her, did you see anything in his hands?
No. Two statements before she talked about the interaction between Mr. Reeves leaning forward and Mr. Olson.
I'm going to sustain. I haven't heard anything that's inconsistent. It may be different, maybe you're on different time periods or jumping back and forth, but I haven't heard anything inconsistent with that.
Ms. Roy, before Mr. Reeves stands up, did you see any interaction between Mr. Reeves and Mr. Olson at all?
When he leaned forward and said something to him about the cell phone.
Let's see it again. 9 through 16.
All right. Sustain this to that little bit, I guess.
You mean overruled?
I mean overruled, yeah.
Ms. Roy, did you remember a deposition that I took of you on March the 23rd of 2015?
I remember a deposition. I don't remember who it was.
Okay. Remember that it was from one of our defense team, Mr. Michaels or myself.
Okay.
You remember the following questions and answers that you gave at that deposition? Question: did you see any interaction between Mr. Reeves and Mr. Olson at all? In other words, you said, not until Mr. Reeves comes back. Before that, I was not aware. My husband, I guess, realized what the problem was, but I did not. I just knew that he was very irate. He was just very upset. He was going through, and so then when he came back, then I turned to look because I thought, what the heck's going on with these guys? So before Mr. Reeves leaves, you don't even see any interaction between Mr. Reeves.
Well, that question said, did I hear anything? Hearing something and seeing something are two different things.
Question says, did you see any interaction? This is what the question said.
Okay, I apologize. I thought it said, did you hear something?
Did you see any interaction between Mr. Reeves and Mr. Olson? So you didn't see any interaction between Mr. Reeves and Mr. Olson, did you?
I believe I did. I believe I did. I don't know why I didn't say it then.
Okay.
I do remember seeing him lean over.
Okay.
There was so much going on.
You mean with the previews?
Well, with the two of them, it was just very nerve-wracking.
Well, but hold on. We're at a section where initially on my cross you said, I just saw Mr. Reeves lean forward, but I couldn't hear what was being said, right?
Yes, but he leaned forward and then he almost immediately got up and started walking out.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So now you're talking about Mr. Reeves getting up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying you didn't see him hand anything to his wife,
I did not.
and you're seeing him walking out, right?
Right, because he was right in front of me,
And I
yes.
believe on direct examination you used the word he barreled through.
He did.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about that. Now, as you're seated in the chairs of the Cobb Theater, if you're seated in those chairs, there's limited space
Mm-hmm.
between your legs and the back of the front row, correct?
Right.
Okay. And so, if you're going to be leaving the theater, especially if you are a larger person, you may have some difficulties.
Objection, speculation.
No.
She's obviously not a larger person, Judge, so to ask her what a larger person would do is inappropriate
She
and
can
speculation.
use her common sense and life experiences. I'm gonna overrule.
You would agree a larger person may have a bit more difficulty in getting through, correct?
Yes, but that doesn't limit his speed.
We're going to talk about that in just a second. You also indicated on direct that when you were seated there in your seat and the previews were playing, that you could hear, for example, individuals in the row in front of you, and you described those voices that you could hear because of the noise as being mumbling, correct?
Right.
Okay. And so what you're saying is, today, with reference to Mr. Reeves, is that when he started moving near you, you heard him mumbling.
I did.
Okay. Now, very close to Mr. Reeves, Mr. Reeves, Mrs. Reeves, empty chair, and you, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. And so as Mr. Reeves is going down that aisle, do you know if his wife was talking to him?
I do not.
Do you know if he was talking to his wife?
But why would he be mumbling in front of me if he was still talking to his wife?
Well, because he's still talking. Hey, he's only a few feet from you, right?
I don't believe he was talking to his wife.
And why is that?
Because he would have had to talk a lot louder and he would have had to have been a lot clearer. He was mumbling.
Well, did you see his wife? Were you seeing her face when he was
I
moving
was
across?
not.
were you even seeing Mr. Reeves's face as he was coming in front of you?
I did.
Okay, what did you see?
Like a mumbling face. He was just down, he was looking down like this, and he was walking across, and he was mumbling.
Whoa, wait a minute, I see your hands. Was he doing this?
No, that's my indication that he was going fast.
Well, did you see him actually doing this, holding on to the wall as he was trying to get by?
No,
You didn't see him do it, so he wasn't doing that.
no.
You're saying that he didn't step on your toes.
He bumped my foot, but he didn't step on my toe.
Did you think he bumped on your foot intentionally?
No,
Okay. He's gone for how long?
5-10 minutes.
You don't watch him walking down the stairs.
I did see him walking down the stairs, yes.
Well, how was he walking?
Just like you walk when you walk down the stairs. He was
Normal walk?
more like in a hurry walk.
Hurry walk. Okay, and what gave you the impression? Was he doing anything with his hands? Because the good thing about this place is that, you know, there are some limited videos.
I'm not objecting
It- it's-
argumentative and trying to intimidate.
I'm not intimidated. Was he walking with his hands?
No,
He was not. Three minutes later, now, let me ask you a question. Did you believe that there were some other people to your right?
yes, another couple arrived after we were seated, and they were sitting to the right.
Do you believe that to be the off-duty sheriff's officer?
I have no idea who it was.
And so you have two people to your right, a male and a female?
I have no idea. They were sitting to the right of my husband.
Okay. And did you see what Mr. Reeves did when,
I have no idea. I just know he went by them.
so you didn't see any of the interaction he may have had with them? But you see Mr. Reeves coming back?
I did.
When did you first see Mr. Reeves as he was coming back? Did you see him
I think when
he
I
was
could
coming right in front of you, or did you see him walking up the stairs?
Oh, no, I saw him walking up the stairs.
Okay, so how was he walking up the stairs?
Like you walk up the stairs, just walking up the stairs.
Normal.
I think so, yes.
And when he reached your row to maneuver in front of these two people that were seated here at the very end of the row, did you notice what was happening there?
I noticed that he was coming in the row, and I backed up to make room for my feet so he could go by me.
But I want to take you before he gets to you. Did you see what he had to do in order to maneuver in front of the first two people in your row?
I don't think so, no.
You first saw Mr. Reeves as he was getting closer to you?
No, I saw him coming up the steps.
Okay, but did you see him way out there when he first entered your row?
Yeah, I'm gonna sustain what she just said.
Judge, can I ask her whether she saw him when he entered the row?
Go ahead.
Did you see Mr. Reeves when he entered your row, at the very end?
I really don't remember.
You believe you first saw him further in when he got near you?
No, I noticed him coming up the stairs.
Okay.
She hadn't finished answering that previously, so overruled. That's,
What did you see him doing
in your row as he was coming back?
He was crossing up by my husband and myself, and he was going to sit in his seat.
Well, was he, at this point in time, walking normal?
You could tell that he was still agitated. Whether he was walking normal or not, I don't know.
Okay, well, let's try to see if we can define that. You could tell that he was agitated. You've never seen Mr. Reeves before that
No,
day.
but I've seen agitated people.
I understand. But you had never seen Mr. Reeves before that day.
No.
Tell me what your observations were of Mr. Reeves. Could you see his hands moving?
My honest observation of Mr. Reeves was the first time when he started walking across to go into the lobby, and he struck me as an angry man. That's my observation.
What struck you as an angry man? I want to try, was it his
Somebody
face?
who's mumbling and walking quickly and not being concerned with crossing over people and saying, "Excuse me," when you go by.
Okay.
That strikes me as an angry man.
Was he walking straight, or was he kind of trying to slide?
Objection, asked and answered, Judge. She said this is the third time that she's describing how he...
Sustained. Let's move on.
Now, when he came back, did he sit down immediately?
Yes, I believe he did.
And you believe that when he sat down, he started talking to his wife?
No. He appeared to lean over and speak with Chad Olson.
Page 25.
As far as the whole concept of what you saw, object and trying to impeach her through this particular question.
Judge, starting on page 25, lines 24 through 25, and then the following page.
Overruled.
Now, Ms. Roy, you remember the deposition that I took of you?
I
Mr.
stated
Mike?
earlier that I don't remember it, but I must have done it because you have a statement.
Okay. And so I'm going to ask you whether the following questions and answers were asked of you in that deposition. Question. And so what else did he do that made you think he was angry? You said, well, when he came back once again, he barreled through and he went and sat down. And he was talking to his wife. I don't know what he said. I then turned to look at her. Remember that?
It's quite possible. It was a long time ago. To try to remember today every single thing that happened. If I wrote it, it must have happened.
Okay. Now, how long was Mr. Reeves talking to his wife?
Well, if I don't remember him talking to her, I can't tell you how long it was.
Okay. What's the next thing that you do remember Mr. Reeves doing?
I do remember him leaning forward to talk to Mr. Olson.
Okay, so now you see Mr. Reeves actually leaning forward again,
Yes,
like you had seen previously?
yes.
And could you hear the conversation between Mr. Reeves and Mr. Olson? Could you hear Mr. Reeves, first of all?
I don't know who was talking. I know there was a conversation about a cell phone.
Okay. And was that conversation about the cell phone loud?
Louder than you would expect a voice in a movie theater to be.
Now, did you see Mr. Olson stand up?
Mr. Olson? Yes,
And that's when you realized that Mr. Olson was a big man as well, a tall man.
he was a tall man.
A tall man. And you saw Mr. Olson, when he stood up, you saw him turn around
And face Mr. Reeves.
and face Mr. Reeves, correct?
Yes,
You still haven't heard Mr. Reeves say anything. You didn't hear anything from Mr. Reeves at this point.
no,
But you heard Mr. Olson getting quite angry to the point where you were real concerned.
I did not hear Mr. Olson getting angry. I saw them, and it gave me the impression that there was going to be an altercation.
Well,
I did not hear any words. It was not like I could hear Mr. Olson contacting Mr. Reeves.
okay. And so the very next thing that you hear, is that when you hear or see the flash?
I saw popcorn flying. I saw an arm come up, which I know belonged to Mr. Reeves. I saw a red flash. And then I saw Mr. Olson turn around and start walking out of the aisle, and he collapsed.
Okay, so let me try to break that down if we can. You have Mr. Olson standing up facing Mr. Reeves, correct?
Yes,
Are you looking at Mr. Olson, or are you looking at Mr. Reeves at this time, or both?
I'm trying to look at both of them.
You are, okay. Do you see Mr. Olson's mouth moving? As if he would be talking, even though I know you told me you couldn't hear it.
No, I was not looking at the mouth. I was watching hands. I was afraid that somebody was going to throw a punch.
Okay. And so you say now that the next thing you see is popcorn.
Yes, I saw popcorn flying.
Okay. Did you see popcorn in anybody's hand?
No, I originally thought the popcorn was Mr. Olson's popcorn, but I learned later that it was Mr. Reeves' popcorn that Olson grabbed and threw back at him.
Who did you learn that from?
I saw it on the video, the one that was on the TV for the movie, on the news way back 2-3 years ago.
And that changed your mind?
It did not change my mind. It just made me realize who had the popcorn.
It made you realize who had the popcorn.
Yes.
Objection asked.
And so now you believe that it was not Mr. Olson who had the popcorn.
That's correct.
Now, you said also on direct examination, I want to try to see where this fits in. You said on direct examination that Mr. Olson had said something about, you turned me in.
Yes.
I want to, in the little sequence of events that we just talked about here, where did you hear Mr. Olson say, you turned me in?
I'm thinking right now it must have been when he first came back when Mr. Reeves first came back, after going to report him to the manager.
Okay. And when he said, "You turned me in," did he say that loud?
Must have been loud enough for me to hear him, yes.
The previews were still on?
Yes,
Previews were still loud?
must have been, yes.
Now, it was still dark there in the theater when all this was happening?
Well, the film had not started yet. It wasn't completely black.
I figured it wasn't, but it was still dark.
Yes,
And you could not see, for example, the color of Mr. Olson's clothing because it was dark.
I don't know. I want to say something about gray and blue, and I don't know if that's when he walked in front of me. I don't know.
No, I'm talking about Mr. Olson, I'm sorry.
Oh, Olson. I know, I don't know. I think he had a white shirt on, but I'm not positive of that.
You never saw Mr. Reeves stand up after he sat down coming back that second time.
I don't believe so.
And you never saw Mr. Reeves actually, before he sat down, grab the popcorn from his wife and then sit with the popcorn in his seat.
No.
And I believe you've indicated before you never saw any hand motions.
Just objection, ask and answer.
Sustained. Just that you said it before. That's classic ask and answer.
I haven't had, this is a question that it was in direction that she said that, not here. You never saw Mr. Olson reaching over towards Mr. Reeves with his hands?
Mr. Olson.
Yeah.
No, I did not.
Now, you leave the theater relatively quickly after the shot was fired? I believe you said your husband said, let's.
Yes, well, my husband told me that we had to leave. We went into the lobby.
And that lobby is like a concession area with some tables?
Yes,
Okay. And there was quite a few people congregating in that area, correct?
yes,
In fact, while you were waiting in that particular area, you then, after a while, see police coming in to go into the theater, correct?
yes, it was quite frightening, yes,
And it was emotional for you.
yes,
And you were in that concession area for somewhere between a half an hour and 45 minutes before someone contacts you, correct?
I have no idea how long we were there.
So it could be half an hour to 45 minutes?
If you have something that tells you that, I'll say yes. Otherwise, I really
I
don't
do.
know. Okay, well then, yes.
And the voluntary statement form that you filled out that day, remember that?
Yes,
You filled it out in that area,
yes,
as other people were filling out that form.
I believe so.
Speculation.
In fact, while you were seated there, everybody was talking about what happened,
Yeah, you could hear people chattering out everywhere.
about what happened.
Well, imagine,
Well, you could hear them talking, correct?
I didn't hear what they said, but everybody was talking. I mean, my goodness, it was shocking, yes.
And likewise, your husband talked to you about what he had seen.
I'm sure he did, yes.
And you spoke to your husband about what you had seen.
Yes.
And certainly for that entire period of time that you were there, no police officer came over to you and said, do not discuss what you saw in the theater with anybody else.
That's true.
And while you were there for that half an hour, 45 minutes, you never saw a police officer coming over to that group and instruct them, do not talk about what you saw in the theater with anybody else.
That's true.
And since this incident, you've certainly been attuned to the news media and what the news media reported in this matter, correct?
We listen to the news every night.
Okay. And the interview that you had an interview with a police officer, did you not? There at the scene? In addition to your voluntary
Oh,
statement?
yes, yes.
You had a police officer that interviewed you?
Yes,
It's a short interview?
I believe so, yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. And this witness be released. You want to remain under subpoena?
She remains, and she remains.
Mr. Roy, you're free to go today. There's some slim possibility you could get recalled. You're still under subpoena, so if you get called back, you'll need to come back. You'll get plenty of advance notice if that happens. I don't anticipate that happening, but it could.
Okay,
So
thank you.
you'll still be under subpoena. Thank you, ma'am.